Week 8 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few quarterbacks I would bench this week. The first guy, Ryan Tannehill of the Tennessee Titans. So Tannehill, he had a pretty decent game in last week's ball game versus the Kansas City Chiefs. 270 passing yards, a touchdown in Into, and 6 rush yards with a rushing touchdown. But he's been mediocre in my opinion this season here. He's only cracked 20-point fantasy games three times the whole season here is Tannehill. And this week it's in Indianapolis, a defense that's played him pretty decent throughout their career, even though in their first matchup of the season, he went for 197 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and 56 yards rushing. But this week, I don't think he's going to be as good as he was in that Week 3 matchup. And his yards were still low in that game, and he even rushed for 50 yards. So I think this week, Tannehill, 15 to 20 is a ceiling for fantasy points this week versus Indianapolis. And I just would bench him this week with better options to start. The next quarterback I would bench is Carson Wentz in that same game. So we just saw this Tennessee Titan defense shut down one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in all of pro football, and Patrick Mahomes in Week 7. And Carson Wentz, he's been playing well the last 4 games here for this Indianapolis team. Week 4 at Miami, 228 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Week 5 at Baltimore, 402 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and a fumble loss. Week 6 versus Houston, 223 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. And Week 7 at the 49ers, 150 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 23 rushing yards with a touchdown and a fumble loss. So the difference here this season for Carson Wentz is he's not really turning the ball over. He's keeping the ball safe for the most part. I know he's had a couple fumble losses over the last few games here, but he's playing good football, no doubt about it. But this week here, in Week 8, I think this Tennessee Titan defense, they're going to have the same type of game plan like they did versus Kansas City and get heavy pressure on Carson Wentz in this game, even though I know this Indianapolis Colts offensive line is way better than the Chiefs, it seems like, at this time of the season. But right here, I think this could be a low-scoring game where we see a lot of the field goal kickers make a difference, and obviously Derrick Henry in this one. So this week, I would bench Carson Wentz, and the third and final quarterback I will bench this week, Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins. So Tua, he came back the last 2 games and had big ball games, no doubt about it. Week 6 at Jacksonville, 329 passing yards, 2 touchdowns in Into, and 22 rush yards in that game in London. And Week 7 versus Atlanta, 291 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and 29 yards rushing with 2 interceptions. But this week, it's a totally different animal here at the Buffalo Bills that give up the least amount of fantasy points to quarterbacks. So I think the big game is finished here for Tua. And we'll go back to that Week 2 matchup where this Bill team knocked him out of the game early, where he only threw 13 passing yards and broke a few ribs. So this Bill team, they know how to get to the quarterback. They got Tua hurt early in the season. And in this game, I think he's going to be running for his life in this one, taking a lot of hits and making a few turnovers. So right here, he's not worth a start, in my opinion, and I would put him on the bench. So that's a few quarterbacks I would bench here in Week 8 of the fantasy football season.